Okay, well, a game that certainly lived up to its billing, you'd have to say. Max Barry, ultimately the difference, I think, between the sides. What a game he had.
Aye, he did. He was excellent. Got high praise from his manager afterwards as well, but on Saturday's evidence, you couldn't really argue, certainly, that he'd be in the discussion in terms of best players in the league this season, because he was a real talismanic figure for Buckie in the middle of the park on Saturday. Not just his goals, but just his all-round play, really, in terms of keeping the ball and moving the ball and things like that. And I thought a good foil for him as well. I thought Jack McIver, also in that engine room, was excellent as well going forward in terms of what he produced. And I think you saw in a lot of the chances as well Buckie had in those highlights that, you know, one of the two of them was involved generally in most of Buckie's good play. And I would say probably over the piece, I'd say Buckie just about deserved that. I felt they were the sort of more creative team during the 90 minutes. I mean, at 2-1, Brechin sort of had a spell where they turned the screw a bit and they got their equaliser, but I felt Buckie, I mean, we've seen it so often, they score late goals, but they sort of came again, created some chances, got their goal, and I'd say they probably deserved it. And really, looking at it overall, it was a game they needed to win, or at least needed to avoid defeating more than Brechin. Probably a point would have been quite a good, decent result for Brechin, all things considered, because it would have kept the gap the same. But now for Buckie, 9 points behind, 4 games in hand. Obviously it's still a long way to go, and you've got to win the games in hand. But that was a really big result for them on Saturday.
Played some really good stuff, didn't the Buckie, going forward? I thought it was interesting when Brechin lost the ball, how quickly Buckie were getting it forward, how many numbers they were getting forward. There were so many attacking options as well. Well,
Brechin are so good with their fullbacks and getting forward, so naturally there's gaps to exploit there when they're out of possession. And Buckie, you're right, they exploited it every time. The amount of times you saw a Buckie player running the channel and going into that space, and the amount of balls in the box and chances that they had. I mean, they could have been out of sight long before it needed an injury time winner. They were really strong.
Well, what you're saying there as well is, I mean, midfielders help, but like Josh Peters and then Lyle Keir, who was playing wide on the left, the two of them particularly, I mean, Jack McIver did it a lot as well, but the two of them particularly are very athletic and quick as well, so that, with what you were touching on, makes a big difference in terms of being able to sort of counter quickly just with their pace going in behind.
I mean, look at Andy McCaskill's chance. I mean, he just runs out of steam. I think it would be
one
of his
teammates. Probably the wrong man, and Andy would say that.
The one guy you
himself.
didn't want to be running through, making that break for midfield. He's such a good, creative, quality player. But bless him, I don't think he would be the fastest player in the Buckie team. But that just shows how they were able to exploit in an instance any time that Brechin lost possession.
I'll be interested to see how Brechin react to that blow.
I think I would expect they'll react pretty well. I mean, we've seen them, when they've had bad results before, they've come back strongly. And I mean, the thing as well is right now, points on the board, top of the league, they are still in the position everyone wants to be in. I mean, I think Gavin Price in his interview probably hit the nail on the head a wee bit in terms of their own maybe mistakes a wee bit perhaps led to their downfall. But I think, like, you look at their squad, they've got even like Matthew Wright coming on and scoring. They've still got a good squad and they're still in a good position, so I don't think you're going to see Brechin crumble after one defeat, certainly. And on another day, I mean, you look at maybe small margins. On another day, could have had a penalty when it was 1-1, potentially, I would say. I mean, I know I think it was very tough for the referee, Greg Suter, and certainly at the game on first viewing, I couldn't have said whether it was a penalty or not, but when you see the replay, Jamie Richardson does get to the ball before Tom Ritchie, and then, okay, the ball maybe comes off Tom Ritchie, but he is still tripped, and it's like, some days, different referee, maybe you get that, and maybe Brechin are left feeling that if you get that and, of course, score, it changes the game, but it's all left spots and maybes now.
A word for Buckie assistant manager Lewis McKinnon, clearly sent on by his good pal Graham Stewart to help Buckie shut up shop. I think though that Lewis would have burned down the shop if it had stopped Brechin scoring again.
The embodiment of taking one for the team, I think.
Using his experience, I think, as well. Like, I think...
Borderline cynical.
I think with the first one, maybe, I mean, I thought at the time with the first one, Jack Murray was round on the cover, so he maybe didn't need to pull him, but when you see it again in the highlights, maybe with both of them, it was instances where he did need to make the foul just to be sure. Certainly the second one, Grady McGrath was past him in a way, so that was one that was right in front of me, and as soon as the ball was not knocked past him, you could see exactly what was about to happen. But I mean, Lewis obviously wouldn't have wanted to get sent off, but ultimately, by hook or by crook, he stopped his team from conceding a late equaliser, and just have to take the suspension. But they've, as I say, cynical and whatever else, but used his experience. Like, if that was maybe a young player, maybe go, I don't want to get sent off, so they wouldn't have done it. And Lewis, clearly, the team winning was the most important thing, and that panned out okay for Buckie in the end.
The best compliment I can pay him, if the roles were reversed and that was a Brechin in that situation, the same thing would have happened.
Alright, well, let's move on to our second highlights game from the weekend. Just a warning, slightly less thrilling, but it's Rothes against Keith from McKessick Park. Okay, the big moment in that one, Michael Finnis's penalty that wasn't converted for Rothes. I suppose it was one of them where if you blast it in the middle like that and the keeper dives, then it looks like a great penalty, but just Craig Reid stayed where he was.
It's interesting because I think
Carlo.
Michael Finnis maybe wouldn't be best pleased with this programme, because last week Martin Callum, his old Clach mucker in the Fantasy Fives, had Michael Finnis in his team of guys that he'd played with, and said he'd seen him take about 50 penalties for Clach, and he'd put every one down the middle and goalkeepers hadn't cottoned on. So I think maybe Keith, Craig Ewan and Craig Reid did cotton on to that. But I mean, take nothing away from Craig Reid in fairness, because I mean the first save was an excellent save, but to be up and save the rebounds, fair play. But maybe Michael Finnis's old colleague Martin Callum's kind of sold his secret a wee bit there. But I thought, despite what you said before you introduced it, I actually thought for a 0-0 this was not a bad game. There was a few decent chances, and maybe with a wee bit more quality from either side in the final third they could have won it. I thought particularly second half Keith came on strong. Michael Taylor was a wee bit unlucky. Him and Jake Stewart got into some good areas, and I mean, I think over the piece you'd probably say, especially with having survived a penalty being conceded, a point's probably a slightly better result for Keith than it is for Rothes, being away from home as well, and sort of keeps their bit of momentum going. They got back to winning ways in midweek against Turriff. They've not picked up many points on the road this season. That's a point away from home, and they played quite well, and they seem to have found, I know Craig Ewan's changed his formation slightly, going more with a 4-3-3 now, and he seems to have found something that's working for them. For Rothes, I think it's maybe early to say concerning signs, but it hasn't been since Richard Hastings has had 3 games in charge, but since Ross Jack left, I know they weren't in the best of form when he departed, but it hasn't been great really. They've had 8 games since he left, picked up 5 points, and Richard Hastings 3, 1 goal scored, 1 point picked up. So clearly, I think at both ends there's a bit of work to do to sort of rediscover, what we've seen Rothes being capable of in the past.
Keith, in that second period, I kind of felt they had the better of the play, maybe just a little bit decision making, final pass in the Rothes area. Possibly,
but I think that maybe comes with just the kind of season that the Maroons are having, because we watch them and they tend to be a team that gives a goal away as soon as they score, or struggle to score. It always seems to be one or the other. So could they have won the game? Yes, but I think, as Callum said there, a point away from home and a clean sheet, more importantly, it'll be something that they'll take away and think that's quite a reasonable result for them.
Well, that's 2 clean sheets. They've had 2 clean sheets Keith have had in a row now, and the bottom line is, if you look at sort of the bottom 6, say, It's not often during a season where those sides have been able to keep back-to-back clean sheets. So I think that's a real positive for Keith. And just with what you were saying as well, is like, and I've said this multiple times this season, but if you look at a lot of the even games they've lost an awful lot of games by one goal. Like, they have competed well in a lot of games, and I think we saw that again Saturday.
Okay, let's move on to another result from Saturday that looks reasonably significant for the Brechin Highland League title race. Turriff United 2, Brora Rangers 2. Rhys McEwen scoring again early for Turriff. Kyle McLeod equalised on the hour. Dale Gillespie then had Brora in front for the first time from the penalty spot in 78 minutes, but Turriff not giving up. It's a late free kick. Murray Cormack tucked it away, sort of sliding in. Quite a good video, quite enjoyed that. But
Rhys McEwen's delivery for that equaliser was top class. I mean, he's obviously scored the first one, but he probably deserves more credit for his part in the second, because it was just begging to be finished, that delivery.
Brora, they've obviously still got games in hand. Do they need favours now from teams above them?
I think so. What have they played? 17 games. It's going to be a real taxing schedule on that squad between now and the end of the season, and they've pretty much got to be flawless in terms of the results. And even after that, kind of hope other teams are slipping up. It's a big ask.
The thing is, they've got the 17 games to play. If, and it's a big if, they were to win all of them, they would finish up on 86 points, which, whether it's would be quite enough to win it or not, I'm not sure. But I don't think you would be pretty close if you were to end the season with 86 points. You wouldn't be far from it. However, on the evidence of what we've seen over the last week, are Brora in a position where they could go and win all 17 games? Really, on the evidence of what we've seen, the answer would have to be no. To me, it seems like they've had the stuffing knocked out of them a wee bit. I'm sure they'll bounce back, but like, they were blitzed by Buckie last Wednesday, and then they've sort of got themselves in a winning position on Saturday, and over many years you've probably seen Brora see that out, and they haven't managed to do it. So it's been a bad week for them in terms of their hopes, and as you said, it's a tough schedule. But for Turriff, I mean, just this good season they're having continues. I mean, up to 40 points now, and that's, I know they had chances and maybe felt they could have had more out the game, but to take something out of that game against, Brora, who've been one of the sort of standard setters in the league over the last decade, that's still a good result for Turriff, and another good performance as well to go with it. Having
gone down so late as well for the first time, it says a lot about Turriff's confidence, doesn't it, that they've managed to get something from the game?
It does. I mean, they're a formidable outfit on their day. There's still a little bit of inconsistency there, I think, but they are having a good season overall. I think they beat Fraserburgh, and I never said I just kept going
late
to the end
goal,
and looked to win it. So same sort of idea against Brora there. They are not a title challenging team, but they're a team that can certainly give title challengers a bloody nose on a one-off basis.
Okay, Fraserburgh 6, Huntly 0. Opener in this one was Sean Butcher's 100th goal for the Broch. I think perhaps the key moment was Ross Still then being sent off for a high tackle on Aidan Sopel, which Colin Charlesworth, Huntly manager, seemed to have no real complaints about. It sounded a bit like one-way traffic from there.
If you see the tackle, I mean, Ross Still's red card is the key moment in this game, really. I mean, Fraserburgh were already 1-0 up at the time, but if Huntly have a full complement on the park, maybe things work out differently. But Ross Still, Colin Charlesworth said it after the game, and I think Ross Still knew as soon as it happened that he had absolutely no complaints. It was a red card. He just overshot the ball with kind of pretty disastrous consequences, really. And I mean, Huntly, first half of that game, they were playing down the slope with the wind, so although Fraserburgh had chances and they had a goal ruled out for offside, which for the life of me I still can't work out how it was chalked off in that first half. But it was 1-0 half time, then second half I think that was basically one-way traffic. And I mean, the Broch, they were all sort of seemed to be taking a turn to fill their boots. Scott Barber came on, got 2, maybe could have had a hat-trick. Kieran Simpson maybe could had a hat-trick himself, and they were
Yep.
pretty. Ryan Sargent's missed a penalty, or had a penalty saved, I should say. So
Fraser has Achilles heel. Reading it said again. Not costly on this occasion.
thoroughly dominant display for Fraserburgh, as you would have probably expected when they're playing against 10 men for as long as they were. And I think for Huntly, you just sort of write it off and say, well, that just wasn't our day, and move on, try and bounce back next week.
Yeah. To make it clear, Ryan Sargent did go on to score. He scored the goal to make it 2-0, I believe.
Sean Butcher as well actually deserves a bit of credit for his. There's not a huge amount. I think it's only 10 or 11 players in Fraserburgh history who've got 100 goals for the club, and he's done it in sort of like
Rapid
5.
time.
Well, he signed summer of 2018, so like 5 and 3/4 seasons, or 5 and 2/3 of a season. So it's pretty good, especially for somebody who doesn't always start as well. Somebody who comes off the bench a fair chunk of the time as well.
Yeah. Highest leap in the Highland League, relative to size potentially. Hard one to judge that, hard one to get an answer on, but I'll go with Sean Butcher. Nairn County 4, Devon Vale 2. Vale's Jack Mitchell cancelled out Ben Barron's opener early in this one, but Harry Henham and then Ben Barron from the penalty spot had Nairn 3-1 up in the second half. Jamie McClellan pulled one back, and then Ben Barron completed his hat-trick. Craig Stewart, the Devon Vale manager, felt the penalty award to make it 3-1, and 2-goal deficit was what defined the afternoon. It didn't sound like he was particularly happy with the call.
Well, having watched Nairn's very good highlights package, I must say.
Better than ours.
Sort of on a par. I mean, the key incidents. The
your
man
socks up.
off camera is not happy with that, but the key incidents were all there. But what I would say is the penalty incident is very much one of them where if it's against your team, you're nae happy, as Craig Stewart was, and if it's for your team, you're probably go just about a penalty and take that maybe wee rub of the green, because Harry Noble does play the ball the direction the ball goes in. He plays the ball, but he does also play a fair bit of the man, so it's to me a wee bit of a grey area and fit by new in this with sliding challenges. And I mean, you see even at the top level with VAR, that sort of a decision like that you'd get on 7 different days of the week. You'd get probably a different decision. So,
or goalkeeper punching the ball.
But I can understand why Craig Stewart's maybe unhappy with that. The other thing, I thought Vale played quite well, but the other thing he'll be unhappy with is the sort of gifted away Nairn's second goal just before half time, sort of poor kick for Sean McIntosh, and then they never really recovered from that. For Nairn, I mean, Nairn, they were beaten by Huntly in midweek, and they bounced back well. I think Stephen Mackay probably want them to tidy up a few things defensively, but they're scoring goals. I mean, Ben Barron, another hat-trick. He's scored 8 goals now since he came in last month for Elgin, and I mean, I've said it before, but he's a player that was proven at the level, even though he is young. Hasn't quite happened for him this season at Elgin, but then coming out on loan, he's been a really good addition to Nairn's squad, giving them basically guaranteed goals at the top end of the park.
I think it's the last 2 games that we've talked about Nairn as well. You got Ben Barron and Harry Henham. I'm liking this sort of like alliterative names, goal scorers. Nairn, if you look at the table at the moment, you've got a caveat with Brora, who we've discussed having the games in hand and being further down, but they're not far off the top 5 points wise. Like if one of those teams in the top 5 sort of had a sort of shaky moment, you could potentially see a scenario where Nairn get into that.
Well, this week go a long way in terms of deciding whether they can be in that top 5 or not, because they play for Martin at North Lodge on Wednesday, and then they play Fraserburgh at Bellsleigh on Saturday. So you go and get results in those games, it's on for you potentially, but then the other side of it, if they were to lose both those games, it's then difficult. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, there is a case for them being best of the rest, but it is a tough top 5, 6 to kind of break into, I think.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Wick Academy 3, Lossy 0. Surprised to learn that a team of Wick's pedigree in the Brechin Highland League, I know they've had maybe a few seasons where they've been off it a little bit, but first time they've won back-to-back games in 18 months. this one. Thought that was quite
Wow.
a surprising stat. Gary Manson is right though to say that what they now need to do is they've won 19 points this season so far. That's 3 points at home, but 18 of their 19 points have come at home. And what you'd like to see from Wick, and what would have made a massive difference to their stand on the table this season, is if they just managed to get more results on the road, and that's the target for the rest of the campaign.
Oh, clearly. But I mean, Wick, I suppose, are the team making the longest journey every week away from home. So it is tough. Yeah, I mean, Wick are a decent side. They're always a threat for any team at home. But yeah, clearly the challenge is to try and pick up more points on the road.
I think the issue though they've had, and I think they're certainly going the right way now, and I think even next season you'd probably see a improved Wick side. The issue they had was the second half of last season, after quite a decent sort of campaign up until November, December. They tailed off dramatically in the second half of the season, and had various issues with availability and one thing and another. So if you look at their team lines for Saturday, there's 6 or 7. They took in 7 or 8 players in the summer. 6 or 7 players in there who have come in, and most of them, I think Ross Gunn being the exception, most of them haven't played in Highland League before. And it's taken time, and maybe for them to get used to the demands and for them to be available as much as needed and one thing and another. But now Manson has quite a settled squad at his disposal, and I think they're going the right way. And again, as I said, I think next season you'll see them probably take a wee step on again. And I mean, Saturday they did the job pretty comfortably. I mean, Frank McGettrick was very honest and gracious in defeat, I thought, in terms of saying that Lossy just never competed well enough, first half especially, but over the 90 minutes, and at 2-0, again, it's one of them, if you get the next goal, it would have been interesting. They didn't, and they've been beaten as a result. And that's the thing for them, it's a wee bit frustrating, is like Lossy, I'd say, are having a decent enough season, but you talk about standing in the table, there's been maybe 4 or 5 games over this season where they've been playing sides, sort of not the top sides, but the sort of sides middle to bottom, where you could expect them to take something out of the game, and they haven't quite got to grips with it. So that's something Frank will be looking to address, I'm sure.
The goals in that game, just to clarify: Gary Pullen with the opener, a Jared Kennedy own goal, and then Kyle Henderson scored the third. For Wick, final game discussed from the weekend that went ahead: Strathspey Thistle 0, Inverurie Locos 2. Callum Duncan scored, and it was another goal from Miles Gaffney as well, both in the first half. Sounded like your straightforward, if not flashy, win for Locos, but I mean, they're back to picking up, as we've said recently, 3 points on a regular basis.
They're just churning it out. You can't be a 8 or 9 out of 10 team every week. Sometimes you just got to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in, and that's a good win. Anytime you go and you win and you haven't conceded, I think any manager's going to take it.
Yeah, I think Strathspey did have their chances as well during the game, played their part, but again, they're 2-0 down and having chances, and you're looking for that next goal to maybe spark something, and they didn't get it. And you know, it's just the same old story a wee bit with defeat, but they are competing, they are playing reasonably well, Strathspey, but it's every week that goes by, more and more they're sort of thinking, well, we need to start putting points on the board from these decent performances.
Did Locos get their first win of the season? Remind me. About October or something, was it?
In the league, it was
a while.
It was into September, I think. Anyway,
yeah.
They did win in cups earlier than that, because they did quite well in the League Cup. But
9 league wins now. So Dean Donaldson doing a decent job.
they've won 4 of their last 5 in the league, which is good going in anyone's book.
Alright, well, let's have a look at the Brechin Highland League standings after what looked like an important weekend. That's it for this edition of Highland League Weekly. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the show today, there's plenty more to come in the weeks and months ahead, including more features, more highlights and more analysis. Thanks to Paul and Callum and Paul for being here today. The next time we see you will be for a midweek extra. Buckie and Fraserburgh are playing in midweek, aren't they? Yes. So we'll have highlights of that later on in the week, probably reasonably early on Thursday, I'm going to say. Maybe later on Thursday, but on Thursday at some point, barring some huge technical hitch. In the meantime, please follow us on social media if you don't already do so. We're on Twitter, we've got a Facebook group, we're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can also get more Highland League news from the Press and Journal by signing up to our Highland League newsletters. There's a link to do that below this video. But please enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching this week, and we'll see you next time.